But first, if you listen to Greens leader Adam Bandt, the planet is in grave danger. Our reckless use of fossil fuels has created a climate crisis.
The biggest threat to security in our region is the climate crisis. In the middle of a climate crisis, people who are suffering through a cost of living and climate crisis. Climate crisis. We are in a climate crisis. They're making the climate crisis worse.
Well, speaking of making the climate crisis worse, we learned today that climate catastrophist Adam Bandt has been flying around the country on private jets, which of course are the worst polluting form of transport you could possibly use. He charged taxpayers $8,300 to fly on a private jet from Townsville, Rockhampton, get this, to give a speech on the evils of fossil fuels. And then he charged taxpayers $15,000 to fly from Canberra to Brisbane to launch the Environmental Party's election campaign. Now, I'm really worried about the climate crisis, and so are all of you, but clearly Adam Bandt isn't that worried, or at least doesn't seem to be. Now, these revelations of his spending came out today when his expense claims for 2022 were revealed. It turns out he's charged taxpayers almost $1 million in expenses over 12 months. That's on top of his $314,000 salary. He's charged us $12,000 for a vehicle and petrol. He's driving a hybrid, so not completely disengaging from fossil fuels. And get this, he also charged taxpayers $204,000 in printing costs. Now, you can only imagine where all that glossy paper ends up. So Liz and Caleb, I'm kind of confused. I mean, I'm doing my recycling, I've given up eating meat, I'm eating bugs, and yet Adam Bandt's flying around the country on private jets. Is the climate crisis real, or is there something else going on here?
You're not seriously telling me that the Greens are hypocrites, are you?
Well,
you're not seriously telling me that there's one rule for thee and another for me. I mean,
I don't want to believe it, Caleb.
We kind of know that, you know, if the Greens didn't have double standards, they'd have no standards at all. And you can't tell me that he could not have got himself a commercial flight from Canberra to Brisbane.
For $300.
It's not as though it's a route that doesn't fly daily. He could have done that, but no, he had to take a private jet because, you know, God knows what he had to do earlier in the day.
$15,000
and look,
for a flight that you can get for $250.
I know.
Virgin.
And $15,000. He must have been going on a pretty nice plane because I've flown around on some private planes before.
Climate criminal.
I have not paid for them, and yes, I am a climate criminal.
Yeah, but did the taxpayer pay for them?
No, the taxpayer did not pay for them. The private individuals paid for them. And I mean, admittedly, it is just flying around Victoria, but that costs a few grand, right? So $15,000, he's paying for some pretty good service here. And my favourite one, apart from that, is the printing costs that you pointed out, because it's not only where does all that stuff end up, they've cut down $200,000 worth of trees so that he can print out all this garbage that he's putting in people's letterboxes that they don't want to read in the first place. Or maybe, instead of like using his iPad or his computer to read documents and whatever, he insists that they all get printed out just so he can hurt the planet. I mean, seriously, how the bloke can stand up with any credibility now and say, yes, you know, here I am fighting for you, fighting to keep the planet going. Mate, you're just as bad, if not worse, than anyone else in Parliament.
It's classic champagne socialism, and you never get between a socialist and a pile of somebody else's money.
You know, I heard today a great term for that.
This is climate communism at its finest. If you look at the poll in the Daily Telly that they had embedded in this article saying, you know, technically it was within his entitlements, so is it okay that he's done this? 98% out of over 3,500 votes said no, he should be living the sustainability he preaches. Because I think people would be genuinely shocked by this, because we all know if there's one Puritan in Parliament, at least that's how he poses, it's Adam Bandt. It's the leader of the Greens, the ultimate crusader for climate communism. And here he is stripped naked of all his I'm better than you robes of superiority. I mean, it bears mentioning that Bronwyn Bishop's $5,000, now infamous, $5,000 helicopter flight was also well within her entitlements. but it didn't save her. She had to step down from being Speaker. So what are we going to get Adam Bandt to do now that the whistle's been blown on him and he's been exposed for the fraud that he is? Fat nothing, of course. But at least people now know this.